The Oklahoma Sooners are in bizarro world.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Shout out to all the everydayers tuning in and subscribing on the audio side, the video side over on YouTube as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply over at Game Time. He's Jay Smith. Follow him on Twitter at Unfair Sports. I'm John Williams. You can follow me at John9Williams. And the USA Today USLBM coaches poll came out earlier this week, and the Oklahoma Sooners came in at number 16, which we discussed in our previous episode was pretty fair as far as their ranking is concerned. Number 8 in the SEC, lining up with the SEC media poll. But USA Today, the college football analysts, had this to say about Oklahoma. They said, in an unanticipated twist, there are more questions about the Sooners on offense as they transition to the SEC. Quarterback Jackson Arnold brings tremendous potential after serving as Dylan Gabriel's understudy. He will be working behind an offensive line with uncertainty. On the plus side, Oklahoma has a deep receiving group with Nick Anderson, Jaleel Farouk, and Purdue transfer Deion Burks among the standouts. They go on to say, Brent Venables has rebuilt the team's defense ahead of his third year and is blessed with the return of linebacker Danny Stutzman and DB Billy Bowman after both considered the NFL draft. It's a deep and aggressive group at all three levels that forces turnovers. Jay, what's your reaction to what the USA Today college sports analysts had to say about Oklahoma going into 2024?
It sounds like they're paying attention to what's going on in Oklahoma for a change, right? It always feels good to hear that like an analyst actually is recognizing what teams are actually doing. And that's one thing I try to make sure I do a better job of when talking about competition in other places, because it's typically the little things that you don't pay that much attention to that matter the most, especially when it comes to team construction and philosophy and whatever you're going to run. You're doing things that on purpose that you don't want people to recognize that you're putting out there. Well, that analysts obviously recognize that the major focus for this team is defense. We've preached this numerous times over the last couple of weeks. We're going to hear this, honestly, throughout the entire season. We will live and die from this defense, and then being one of the teams that had the most turnovers last year, I don't equate that as too much with success because I feel like it's more of a luck stat, unless your defensive line is just tipping every single pass, right? But I see it as more of luck, but they're putting themselves in those positions to make those things happen too, right? They're initiating it. I had talked to Isaiah Coe during the season, and that was the one thing that he said that Todd Bates had preached to them was on the defensive line. Sure, they're not getting a lot of sacks, but keep those hands up because it alters those passes, which has led to a lot of interceptions. I like that they are actually watching the games and understanding or getting an idea of what Oklahoma's trying to do. So, yeah, I love it. I think it's a good thing.
It is a weird place to be in if you're an Oklahoma fan, if you're an Oklahoma analyst, because for much of the last decade plus, it's been about offense. It's been about outscoring teams. It's been about putting up video game numbers with really, really good quarterback play. The only times that the quarterback play was a little bit hit and miss was the end of the Josh Heupel offensive coordinator era.
Yep.
Again, he was a really good offensive coordinator. Part of the reason Landry Jones leads Oklahoma in career passing yards was because of Josh Heupel. And so you have this tendency to kind of overthink the offense a little bit, or not even overthink, but just take it for granted a little bit because you're not going through a bunch of turnover. You've not had bad quarterback play in a really, really, really long time, and you're not going to have bad quarterback play this year. It's just that there's just a question. We just have to see what Jackson Arnold looks like against Tennessee, against Auburn, against Texas. These are going to be all new experiences for him. Again, that was a good Arizona team that they played in the Alamo Bowl, and there were 4 turnovers. He's going up against a defense all offseason, and there have been turnovers. Quarterbacks are going to throw picks in practice. It's just the way it is, contrary to some Philadelphia Eagles media that want to overrate no interceptions in practice. It's this idea that Jackson Arnold's really, really good. We just have to see it. The offensive line has a chance to be really, really good. We just have to see it.
Yep.
But I love the idea that, hey, defensively, we're good to go. And it's been a long time since we've been able to say that.
Woo! I mean, this is the last time we probably said we had a good defense was back when Brent Venables was on staff, right?
Probably.
And so now that he's made his valiant return, it's a plus that we can say, hey, guys, there's a chance that we're going into a conference that emphasizes defense and actually have a defense, right? Isn't that pretty shocking and exciting? But no, on a serious note, though, that is why Joe Castiglione hires a guy like Brent Venables and brings him in, knowing that when you're going into the SEC, you have to be defensively sound. The teams that don't have defenses in the SEC, you notice it, right? Now, granted, last year LSU was able to figure out how to be a really good team with like 114th ranked defense overall, but efficiency-wise, they were still middle of the pack in the country. They just had the Heisman-winning quarterback and an absurdly talented offense. Things may be shifting a little bit, but keep this in mind. Georgia still owns things on the defensive side of the ball. Same thing with Alabama. That's the one thing that I'm hoping Oklahoma walks in and becomes one of the dominant forces. I want us to be like Georgia on defense. If we can do that, it's a wrap.
Yeah, you listen to my former co-host Josh Helmer talk about it all the time. Never concerned about Oklahoma offensively. And for 25 years, you could only probably pick out 2 or 3 times where Oklahoma's offense was bad, or not even, I wouldn't even say bad, but average, right?
Yeah.
Like just average. They haven't had a bad offense in a long, long time.
Wow.
And more often than not, they have great offenses. So to me, I have an expectation that Oklahoma's offense is going to be great. But what it hasn't had in a lot of years is a great defense to go along with it. And that's the difference that we saw in the Lincoln Riley years. I mean, they could put up all the numbers. They just couldn't get stops when it mattered most. You know, when teams were trying to ground and pound, they couldn't get a stop. They couldn't get off the field on third down. In 2022, when the things were falling apart, the Kansas State game against TCU, it was the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Dylan Gabriel was putting up decent numbers that year, but when the defense is allowing 30 points per game, it's hard to win that way. Well, they improved by nearly a touchdown year over year. So it's heading in the right direction. It's heading in the right direction. Now it's just a matter of taking that next step to becoming that top 15, top 10 defense and putting yourself in the same category, the same tier of defenses as the Georgia, as Alabama, to help you actually contend for a national title.
That's the most important thing, is you want to be making the steps towards that, right? The closer you get to fulfilling that or achieving that level, the better your team's going to perform. And all we got to do is that. Then you got to have the depth piece, right? You know, we've already seen one injury that we're still waiting on confirmation on with Jaden Gibson. We're going to see more. That's college football. We've seen that through the SEC, especially in the physical conference. You're going to get nicked up a little bit. The goal is to have more people hurt than injured, you know, people that can still potentially play. But building that competitive depth that's needed to go along with, like you said, pushing to achieve a really good defense, it's going to be critical to be successful in the SEC. And I think we can get there. I think that Venables has put together a foundation. He's torn it back to the studs to get us at the point where we're building towards something like that. So no worries on this end for me.
Yeah, 3 top 10 recruiting classes to start his tenure, highlighted by the 2024 class that really emphasized the defensive line. It's got Oklahoma heading in the right direction. Now, will they be able to, again, make another significant jump year over year heading into 2024? That's going to be the question. I think they're going to be good, but can they ascend to great this year, take some of the pressure off of the offense to have things figured out? Position that will help take the pressure off of the offense, that's tight end. Got to get something more out of the tight end group. Who's going to step up? And will Oklahoma be able to overcome a good Tennessee Volunteers team in their first SEC game? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. If you're looking for the best tickets, the last minute deals, and the lowest prices, you've got to go to Game Time. I know you've been out there, you've been wanting to get to a game and you just haven't been able to find tickets. Well, Game Time's got you covered. They've got a great app that's easy to use, and you get an awesome view of what your seat's going to be looking at inside the app. They've got all-in prices. That means your fees, your taxes, all of it is included in the price that you see over at Game Time. So no surprises when you get to check out. And Game Time is an official partner of Major League Baseball. They take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. There's great opportunities to get into Oklahoma games. If you're looking for tickets to Tennessee, if you want to go see them play South Carolina, you can get those deals over at Game Time. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. Again, all in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And they've got Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball, college football, NBA, NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast with our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, as he gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, we've been going position by position over the last few days, discussing some of the bigger storylines as Oklahoma is in fall camp, getting ready for the 2024 season. And next up is tight end. And this is a position that needs somebody to step up. We've got intriguing options in Jake Roberts and Bauer Sharp and Caden Helms and Devon Mitchell and Cade McIntyre. I mean, there's some really intriguing options in this position group, but no real answers.
Yeah, we've got questions. I'll put it this way. I don't feel like we have concerns like we did last year, right? I mean, we brought back Austin Stogner, and as excited as we were with getting him, we recognized rather quickly that he wasn't the same Stogner that didn't transfer to South Carolina. Like pre-South Carolina, the post, you could tell it was a little bit more wear and tear on the body, but you know, we took what we need, what we got, right? We just accepted it and continued to run. This year, that room is a lot more stacked, right? From bringing in a Bauer Sharp, who's super athletic, right? He's just got to learn how to play at the next level. Being a former quarterback is always good. Hampton Fay, he was a former quarterback at Michigan State that's transitioned into a tight end, and he's still trying to figure things out as well. And then, you know, Jake Roberts, who played tight end at North Texas for Seth Luttrell, then goes to Baylor, now comes here, the older brother of Nate Roberts, who we're still chasing or whatnot. But then you've got the young guy, Von Mitchell, right? You got him in. He's only 17, and he decided to forego his senior year to come in early to get that work in. Caden Helms, Cade McIntyre, who were both hurt most of last season. We've got a lot of dudes in the room that now we need to see who wants to be the one to step up. And so having that long list of them, the question is, who's the guy that you feel like has the best chance of actually stepping up this coming season?
I don't know.
Isn't that hard, right? That's why
I know nobody wants to hear somebody trying to analyze a position say they don't know. You got to have an opinion on everything, right? Well, here's my opinion on the tight end group. I think it's going to be a revolving door. I think we're going to see tight end by committee. I think you're going to see a guy like Jake Roberts who gives you a really, really steady floor for the position. Somebody who's going to be able to catch 25 balls for 250, 270 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns. He'll give you a nice solid floor. You have a little bit better upside with guys like Bauer Sharp and Devon Mitchell and with Caden Helms, even Cade McIntyre to a lesser extent. I mean, let's not forget, Caden Helms was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, much like Devon Mitchell, who really was a 5-star prospect. He just got the negative bump by reclassifying. And Cade McIntyre, in his one kind of real opportunity to catch the ball, caught a pass and went for more than 20 yards. So he's an athletic dude that can do some things in the passing game for you. Has he gotten enough size on him to be an every down tight end? I don't know that yet. But I think you've got enough guys. You've got much better depth than you did last year. That I can say definitively. Austin Stogner and Daniel Parker, solid. It's fine. The depth that you have this year gives you a lot more answers to the questions as you go into the season. So even if I don't have a definitive answer as to who steps up, I feel comfortable with where they're going because you've got a really, really solid floor in a Jake Roberts with better upside than what you had last year.
And that's kind of the way you want to go into a season. You want to feel a lot more comfortable in comparison to, like I said, having those concerns. We had those concerns going into last season in a way, right? And it was mainly because we didn't have the health, right? You still got projects out there too. You got Josh Fanuel out there, the former basketball player that played at Cameron University. He can hoop. He's very athletic. The big thing is being refined around your route running and your ability to catch in traffic, especially at tight end, man. He's going to be catching a lot of passes across the middle, and you got to be able to catch it and take a shot.
Right.
The good thing is Jake Roberts has that experience. And I think the best part about Jake is, and why I think he may be the one to step up. I'm kind of pivoting some of my thoughts because I'm heavy on Bauer Sharp. Don't get it twisted. I think he's the one that's going to probably jump out and be the top dude. And I think Caden Helms, when healthy, he's going to be nasty. But Jake Roberts playing at North Texas underneath Seth Luttrell really gives him a little bit of an edge in the system, right? He has a good understanding of what Luttrell wants from his tight ends because he knows Luttrell uses tight ends. And so as I've been thinking more and more around this tight end room, that's kind of the one thing I think Jake probably is going to help push him a little bit forward. Bauer's athleticism is going to make him out there for passing downs, of course. But Jake being there for passing and blocking, that may be like the secret sauce that gets us over the hump with our tight end concerns of years past.
Yeah, I think if you can kind of identify who does what best, and you can use Jake Roberts as kind of your early down tight end, and then if you get into a third and long situation, can go to Bauer Sharp or Caden Helms, get their athleticism out on the field, give you a better option down the field, then I think it starts to kind of formulate a little bit. But if you're just going to try and peg Bauer Sharp into this, multifunctional tight end role, and maybe he's ready for it. Maybe he's ready to go out there and be an every down tight end. I just don't know that that's the case yet. Everybody's raved about his work ethic, his toughness, his athleticism. I want to see him get out there and having to block a defensive end in the run game. I want to see him, making sure he's containing and getting his seal block down on the outside as they're trying to bump Gavin Sawchuk to the edge. I got to see some of those things. I want to see him crashing down and, taking out a linebacker and making that, that inside zone run work a little bit better. So I just need to see some of those things. But I think you've got good run blocking already in Jake Roberts. So if you don't have it all yet with Bauer Sharp, I think because you've got this good depth, you can run the tight end by committee and feel good about it. Now you might give some things away at times, but that's why I think, okay, if it's early downs, you can run Jake Roberts and he's not going to, his receiving isn't going to be what gets him over, but he can do enough of it.
Even playing in Luttrell's offense like he did, I assume Luttrell's going to put him in those situations to where he's going to be successful as far as catching, right? Yeah. And you're right. We don't know him as much of a catcher, even though he made some catches at Baylor. The consensus thought process around him is he's more the blocking guy, but I honestly think he's going to shock us in the catching avenue too. I think that's what's going to really jump out, and Sooner fans will be like, oh, didn't know the older Roberts had it in him, right? Because we're still, of course, enamored by Nate's capabilities and what he's doing down there at Washington High School here in Oklahoma. You see that he's pretty freakish, right? Mm-hmm. But if Big Brother can go in there and do something that we thought only Little Brother could do, we're going to be really cooking going into the SEC.
Yeah, I think they've got enough options. I think Jake is going to be good enough. You know what I mean? Like, even if he's your every down tight end, if he's kind of doing kind of like a Jason Witten type. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to compare him to a Hall of Famer, but right. Jason Witten was not the most athletic dude out there, right?
Nope.
But he made it work, and he was incredible at finding ways to get open despite some limited athleticism, especially later in his career. You don't have to be a guy that jumps out of the gym to be an effective tight end. If you can run a good comeback route at 8-10 yards, great. If you can run that 5-7 yard out route, if you can run that little flare to the flat, then you can be effective enough. And what you got to do, the most important thing you got to do is make people pay attention to you. And that's going to open things up. You got to get the linebackers paying attention to you, because if you're not a threat, there's no reason to be out there. As we saw, Oklahoma was able to find a lot of success despite not really utilizing Austin Stogner in the passing game. If they can find a way to get the tight end going early and often, which I think they'll make a point of it in non-conference play, to really target the tight end and be like, hey, don't forget about this guy. So the opposing defenses have to account for him. Then it's going to open things up for everybody else. And going into that Tennessee game, which we're about to talk about, that big time SEC matchup, that week 4, first week of SEC play for Oklahoma, you're going to need to have everything cooking on all cylinders. We'll discuss what Oklahoma has to do in that Tennessee game, what we're going to expect from the Vols, and is it a must win? We'll talk about it coming up next on Locked On Sooners. The Tennessee Volunteers will come to Norman likely as a top 15 team in the country, maybe even a top 10, depending on what happens around the rest of the nation in the first 3 weeks. Well, really 4 weeks if you count week 0. So that could be a big time matchup. It's going to have national eyes and national attention, and is one of the better matchups in week 4 in the SEC. The Oklahoma Sooners, they're going to be tested early and often. That's an offense that averaged 31 points a game. They ranked 35th in the nation last year, and a defense that ranked number 22 in scoring defense at 20.3 points per game. This is going to be a balanced Tennessee team. And hey, they're breaking in a 5-star quarterback in their own right, and Nico Iamaleava, a good player, but still he's going to have to go into Norman, and he's going to have to battle an intense crowd, a crowd that is going to be as jacked up as any home crowd as we've seen in the last several years for that first SEC matchup.
You know, the game that to me that's going to really define how I'm going to feel about Tennessee coming to town is going to be their second game of the season, right? So they're traveling to Charlotte to play against North Carolina State at the Bank of America Stadium, where the Carolina Panthers play, and they're doing that neutral site game, right? And North Carolina State's not a slouch of a team, right? They actually have a very scrappy team. They're always typically pretty scrappy when it comes to, especially defensively, and usually offensively, they have enough to get them going. But that's going to be a crowd that we're going to get to see how Nico handles. And just as you said, John, perfect thing. He's coming to us, 80,000 fans that's going to be screaming at him. Now, granted, we're probably going to show Heupel a little love initially. They're going to do a video and everything. But please, fans, don't get it twisted. We're going to lose our minds on them again, just like we did the last time they came to town. And they lost, what was it, 34-10 or 34-13, something like that? We're going to go back to that. We're going to go after their throats. The fans are going to be loud and wearing them out. And so Nico Iamaleava's got to have to figure out the focus and the stadium pulse the entire game. He's going to have to be able to see if he can handle that rattling, and if the routes on the field start moving around on him, because the fans are going to be in it. That's what we're going to have to bring if we want to increase our opportunity to be successful. And so you asked this question initially. Is this a must-win game? John, when I look at this one, I'm going to say just like everybody else is going to say in the comments, yes. And the reason is, it's just because it's the first one. Mm-hmm. No other reason outside of that. If it wasn't the first one, I wouldn't even say it's a must-win game. But it's the first one in conference. Now, like I said, we played them recently. In the last 10 years, we played them twice. But because it's the first game in the SEC, we have got to set an example. And if we shut down this offense, buddy. Notice. The SEC's on notice. Do you think this is a must-win as well?
I mean, yes. I think so, just because you're bringing Josh Heupel back to town. You're trying to show and prove that your defense isn't the Lincoln Riley defenses of old. This is a great test. Yes, Nico Iamaleava is an untested quarterback just like Jackson Arnold. Still, he's a very talented quarterback. If you can contain him in the quarterback run game, you can make sure that him and Squirrel White aren't hitting you for big plays in the passing game, then you're going to have a great chance to slow it down. And I think it's a win for the Oklahoma defense if they can hold them to 24 or less, because I think Oklahoma's offense is going to be able to score. And I mean, they can even do more than that, but it's a huge test right out of the SEC gate for Oklahoma. Is it the best team in the SEC? No. Are they necessarily better than Oklahoma? I don't think so. I don't think that they're as deep or as talented as Oklahoma is across the board, but they do have a good offensive line. They do have some talented skill players. They do have a talented 5-star quarterback. They have one of the best pass rushers in the country in James Pierce that will give Jake Taylor everything he can handle and more. It's going to be a good test, but I do think that it's a must-win game just to get the vibes right. Obviously you want to win them all because you want to go to the playoff. You want to contend for a national title, but just to have the right vibes, because you win that one and then it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off early in the season, but then you got to go to Auburn next. If you come out of the game against Tennessee with a loss and then you got to go on the road to face Auburn, I mean, I think things ratchet it up a little bit, but I'm not too terribly concerned about it. I really feel like Oklahoma wins this game, and I feel like they do so in a fashion that kind of makes everybody take notice.
Yeah, the thing that people are saying the most about Tennessee, and this is something I do agree with, I think they have one of the more underrated defensive lines in the SEC right now.
Sure.
Their defensive line is good. It's anchored by James Pierce. Their edges are solid. Their DTs, I don't think they're bad. I think that they're okay. We'll see what they look like. I mean, losing Tyler Barron, to me, kind of a big deal, even though he's like flip-flopped like 14 different schools at this point in the portal. But, hey, the thing is that the trenches is where we're going to see this game. So on both of us, as long as our offensive line does enough to give Jackson Arnold time to launch it deep or open up a small enough of a hole for Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes, Caleb Hicks, and Mecca Megwa, Taylor Tatum to get through those holes and run up the field, and enough time for him to throw it to like a Deion Burks, and then our defensive line does enough to keep Nico under pressure and just make him have to think a lot faster than he wants, we can win this game soundly. Same thing for Tennessee. It's going to be about the trenches. If their offensive line and defensive line has worked in great cohesion, they're going to put us in problems too, right? We're going to be in hell just like anybody else. So that trench play is the one thing that I'm looking at when it comes to this, because their secondary is not very good. And they just lost their main guy, right? They lost one of their main guy that plays like the star money role, kind of like a cheetah / deal that moves around. They just lost him, right? They just had a big time injury. And so that secondary was thin. It's gotten even thinner. All we need is time. We got time. I think Jackson Arnold can pick them apart.
Yeah, I trust the Oklahoma Sooners wide receivers to be able to make plays against any secondary in the country. I really do. And I trust Jackson Arnold to be able to get the ball to him. I think Seth Luttrell is going to have some creative options where they get the ball out of his hand quickly, whether it's in an RPO situation or those bubble screens that we love so much. But I think they're going to go to much faster, much twitchier guy like Deion Burks than what we've seen last year. I think Nick Anderson is going to show a more refined route running ability. So I think the offense is just going to come together, and that's going to be the game where we say, okay, this offense is ready to go. We see it. Now we've seen it. Now we can trust that this is going to be a team that can contend and compete against some of the better teams on their schedule. So, yeah, must-win game. I think Oklahoma wins it. I think they defend home field. They get off to a great start in SEC play.
Yeah, same. I think that once we hit the field, I think everything will completely change for us. And so, of course, I'm stoked. I'm ready for a start SEC play. I'm just waiting for some football, man. Because the guy is Jordan Thomas is the one that's out, and it appears he's going to be done for the entire season. And like I said, he was their nickelback that played everything. That back seven, that whole back seven is nobody's returning right now. So they've got a lot of things to look at. So if we can give Jackson Arnold time, we can pick them apart.
Just one final note here on the Tennessee Volunteers as far as where they rank in returning production, 94th in the nation.
Yeah.
That's not great. Now, a lot of that is due to the fact that they lost their quarterback. They lost, other skill position players as well. But then they come into the season as the number 16 team in the SP Plus rating. So the analytics like the Tennessee Volunteers and what they have to offer as a roster. But as far as returning production goes, not so much. We're going to see. We're going to see what Tennessee's all about when they travel to Norman, Oklahoma for Josh Heupel's triumphant return. Well, hopefully not so triumphant return on September 21. My wife's birthday. So Jackson, BV, Seth, you got to give my wife a good birthday present that day on September 21. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And for your second listen of the day, Go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all the socials. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Sooners your first listen of the day. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you about the offensive line. Boomer!
Sooner.